Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from. My name is Devin Morgan, Director of Youth Baseball at Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy. This is the Driveline Academy podcast, the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. I am joined, as usual, by my co-host, my brother, my partner, my Driveline Academy Assistant Director, Jeremy Techtiel. I think I checked all the boxes of the stuff that I'm supposed to say at the beginning of this.
There's no cue card sitting back there.
Yeah, so. It's just in the decaying tissue of my brain. It's just like the same stuff rattles around over and over. The pod keeps potting. Listen numbers are well up over 13,000 now, just on our audio platforms alone. So as per usual, thank you guys for the likes and the subscribes. And I assume that it's sharing because I don't know how the heck else this thing is getting out there.
It's what happens when you're dangerous.
Yes. Well, yes. When we are the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast, that's got to be a shirt. That's for sure got to be a shirt.
Merchandise coming soon.
Yeah, merch coming soon. I was thinking, I think last week when we came in and I thought we were going to do a podcast and then we ended up having like a 2-hour department meeting. So we didn't. I know a lot of coaches that are like cooks. And I don't know that I would say chefs, but they're definitely they're trending towards gourmand, and this is everything from guys who are like very focused on like the quality and the technique of what they cook with, whether that's indoors, outdoors. I know guys who know about as much about like pellet grills and smokers and like the whole, your cast iron, whatever. They know just about as much about that as they do about the year's hottest BB core bats every single year, right?
And just to interject here, this is going to continue as The Bear season 2 comes out in 10 days.
Oh, yes.
So we will be, this is now going to be a running theme on this podcast of cooking analogies.
100%. And I think I was thinking about this a couple weeks ago after we had a tournament where we didn't get what we wanted. And I was thinking about it. I think one of those nights is I was doing like a white miso garlic reduction on some some king salmon that I was like pan searing in a cast iron and then finishing the oven. And then I had some other stuff that I made just for my family, like regular old cast iron steak. And I did like these half cut potatoes where you like sear off the bottom in oil and then you flip them and let them finish in the oven. Mm-hmm. And they're like real crispy on the top but very like soft and kind of pillowy in the middle.
I made mozzarella sticks in the air fryer.
Hey, I've done that too. But the thing I was thinking about is I think the reason that I have gone deeper down the rabbit hole about cooking, and that very much parallels with my time coaching, is it's what I can control. Mm-hmm. Right? When I'm cooking, I control ingredients, I control technique, and I control execution. And coaching in general, and youth baseball in particular, is very much a thing that you can't control. You can't, right? And the tricky part is that you can control the preparation, mm-hmm. And I suppose to extend the analogy, you control the ingredients by building the roster, and you control the execution in the way that the team is generally coached in the game. But man, the game is the game, and it's not for coaches to play, it's the players. And to me, it's so funny that as coaches, a lot of us gravitate towards cooking. And to me, it just seems very much I want something in my life that I can control.
Yeah.
I want one thing where it's all on my shoulders and I get to enjoy it, right? Because you could prepare the crap out of a team and then they just have a crappy day, or you meet a good opponent, either one of them, everything in the middle, and then it just goes sideways. Mm-hmm. And you can't control it.
Yeah.
You can control your response.
Sometimes. Yeah, well, all the time. Yeah. Sometimes it's just really hard.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this countless times on the podcast about this desire for positivity in youth baseball being an active choice. Mm-hmm. It's just something that you have to make. But it's so funny to me when I think about this interplay between cooking and coaching that came to mind in some tournament baseball, which is relative to I think the thing that we can kind of slowly roll our way into. Because in that tournament a couple weeks ago, things didn't go great, and my kid had probably the worst start that he's ever had
in a while. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and he came off the bump, and when we got in the car, was really struggling with it, and I ended up I'm always trying to find a way that I can give him context for this stuff to just keep it in mind that look, you're 14, and in the same way that there's no amount of like winning a ring isn't going to future proof anything, I also think that it's true that like largely you can't ruin it either. You know, like the most impactful games that you're going to play at 14 are probably in the future, so long as you don't stop playing now.
Right.
And of course, the person I think about a lot, because we're here in the Pacific Northwest, is old Tim Lincecum, right? And please, for the love of God, let me make clear, I'm not equating my child to Tim Lincecum in any way, shape, or form.
Except for height.
Except for height, right? Like, I mean, Dee's actually got a couple inches on Tim relative to how tall he was when he came in as a freshman in high school. But I was talking to El Jefe, Kyle Bodhi, founder of Driveline Baseball. So if like I throw out like this founder stuff about Academy, he's like the founder of founders.
He's the founder of you.
Yeah, Bodhi is the founder of all the things. And just randomly, we were kind of talking about, Northwest baseball and kind of like the rise and fall, and then kind of this gradual like progression of the NWAC, the Northwest Athletic Conference, which is our JUNICOs in the Northwest. And he was because Bodhi's been around this for certainly longer than I have, and he was talking about, Tim started pitching as a junior, and there's kind of, we think about Lincecum a lot. We think about his performance in college, right? Like did the thing at UW, got drafted, etc. But when he first started pitching in high school, it wasn't great, right? Like it wasn't always great. And I think sometimes when I see kids who really love baseball a lot, and they're really serious about it for themselves, I think the only downside sometimes about having like the Instagram version of baseball is what you interact with. You only see the highlights. And the tricky thing, and like there's a lot of, guys that are probably just as old as I am who will to answer the question like, well, how do you get better at baseball? Well, you got to watch it. And I understand, like, I think from this specific standpoint, it's true. I think that's a hard thing that a lot of times, like, as the attention span of the average teenager goes to just like nil, it's hard for them to kind of understand that aspect of the game because you really only see it if you watch all of it, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to see the highlights get propagated by all these different content accounts, and you're going to see the lowlights get propagated by those type of accounts, right? Like I've seen this couple videos in the last couple of days of somebody on Instagram compiled like the 5 guys at shortstop and catcher that have the worst thrown ball velocity, according to StatCast. And it's a tough scene.
Yeah.
It's a tough scene. But the tricky part is that some of the guys on that list are Gold Glovers.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Dansby Swanson is one of the worst guys about thrown ball velo, according to StatCast. Gold Glover. And I saw it, and I sent it to my kid, but I was like, man, even if I'm sending this to him on Instagram, I have to give him some context. Because if I just send this to him with nothing, he's going to go thrown ball velo good, not being able to throw hard bad. Mm-hmm. And you're defining yourself in like a very binary landscape. When the reality is like, and again, I'm never, ever would I compare my kid to a major leaguer. But what I want him to take away from that is like, then there's many roads to Rome. So anyways, circle all the way back. So I dig up this old article about Lincecum, right? So there's an article from April 6th of 2002. Tim Lincecum, stellar relief pitching, slammed the comeback door on defending state champion Newport and led Liberty to a 4-2 Kingco 3A baseball victory last night at Bannerwood Park. Old Bannerwood, one of our favorite stomping grounds. Blah, 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 blah. Then Lincecum came on in relief for Liberty. He allowed only 1 hit, walked 9, and struck out 6 over the final 2 2/3.
Yeah.
So
it checks out.
And I think so my kid has a bad start and specifically didn't throw a lot of strikes. And we can spend all day, like I can look at the video from Game Changer and I can go, well, that should have been a strike and that should have been a strike. And I can listen to my kid kind of, complain a little bit, inappropriate amount, on the umpire quality or what calls he did or didn't get, whatever. But at the end of the day, the thing that I wanted him to understand most of all, and this is kind of relative to like the coaches and the cooks thing, is like, well, what can you control?
Right.
He's had a hard time this year, I think, understanding what his identity should be as a guy on the bump. And it's led to some performances that were like really good, where he kind of felt that way, and some others where he really struggled a lot. And again, because I'm just his parent, I'm not his coach anymore. It's like, all right, well, what's the thing that I can say to you that's both palatable and actionable? You control the stuff you can control. And yeah, you might walk a guy. It's going to happen. Nobody goes out and throws PGs every single start. That's just not a thing. And you can still get good results if you do this, right? Hey, 6 punchies over 2. What was it, 6?
Yeah.
Yeah.
6 punchies, 9
6
walks.
punchies over 2 2/3. You're going to walk some guys, but like, doesn't mean you can't compete. And I think that part of things is certainly something that we would hope coaches are able to kind of do a good job of helping kids understand that type of context sometimes. Mm-hmm. And you know, the funny thing is I think that same thing plays for hitting, because we've had a lot of games in the last few weeks where like we're getting what we want, we're on time, we're hitting piss rods, we're hitting it right at a guy. Like almost to an alarming degree.
An alarming degree, yeah.
And it's one of those things where like, okay, you know, I'm not the sharpest knife in the shed, but I'm probably not the dullest either. What coaching advice can I give to a kid when they are attacking a hittable pitch, they're on time, they get flush contact, and they just happen to hit it right at the defender? And like one of our kids who's suffered through this a lot, when we had a doubleheader yesterday, I think in the second game, beautiful liner that should have gone over the second baseman's head. Kid was playing right in the exact perfect spot, and guy catches a liner, makes a good play.
Didn't even have to move.
Like, yeah. And he was coming back to the dugout, and you said to him,
make a move. What are you doing hitting right at somebody?
Like,
that's always what I say to them, because like they have to understand, you know, and they, to be clear, they know I'm joking. Like, they don't think I'm actually yelling at them to not, you know, hit it right at a guy. But yeah, like if we do our job, we lose control of everything that happens as soon as barrel contact.
Yeah.
And like, as long as you do everything up to that right, you can't get frustrated if the end result there isn't exactly what you wanted.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have some, and I do believe this, hasn't happened yet this year, but I do believe it's going to balance out in the end.
100%.
Right? And like, you're going to have some where you mishit it, you go off the end of the bat, and you find a little blooper or whatever.
Yeah.
We had a couple of those yesterday. We had one specifically yesterday that, you know, I said, the good piece of hitting, and the first response I got was that was off the end cap. Yeah, I know you still got a base hit. You can be okay with getting a base hit.
Yeah.
You're not going to make perfect contact every time. The goal is to like be able to compete even if you don't make perfect contact, whatever.
Yeah. Be a little hitterish.
Yeah. That's what I say every time they hit it right at somebody. You got to make a move. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Don't hit it directly to somebody.
I mean, try not to. But sometimes it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just, you know, it's funny. Again, to kind of come back to this coaching and control thing. Like, it's one of those things where I'd love to be able to know what the magic word is to say to a kid. Hey, you just hit a liner right at a guy. What am I going to say?
Right.
What am I going to say? And the tough part is that I wonder sometimes if the kids, like, they want a salve. You know, like they want something to like paper over this wound, but it's like, you did everything right. And sometimes in this stupid game, this stupid infuriating game, this stupid nauseatingly frustrating game, you're going to do all the right stuff and you're not going to get what you want.
Yep.
And that's the truth.
And I think a lot about Parks and Rec all the time. But specifically, there was one episode in one segment where like that I think about constantly, where Anne is pregnant. Rashida Jones is pregnant, and she's annoyed. And like, you know, it's just having all these issues or whatever. And Rob Lowe's character, Chris, is solving every single one of them. Like
crushing it,
doing a great job. Like my feet hurt, great, right there with the massage your feet, whatever it is. And she's really frustrated because all she wants him to say is like, that sucks. Like, she doesn't want every problem solved. Sometimes you just, and I think about that a lot. And it's like, sometimes the best thing I could say to a kid is like, man, that sucked.
Yep.
Like, I know you're feeling the same way. And I'm feeling like, that sucked. Let's move on.
Yep.
Like, you did everything you could there. And like, we both want to complain, whether it's, the umpire made a bad call or like a kid, oh, look what I found in my glove. Like,
Yeah.
all you can say is like, man, that sucks. Like, I'm right with you. Like, you did everything right. We're gonna go out and get him next time. And like, there isn't, the more you just make shit up and like, try to find the magic pill or the magic word or the cue, whatever, I think the less trust you're eventually going to get from the player.
Oh yeah.
Because like, they know, so like on that specific example, smart kid, he knows he didn't do anything wrong right there.
Yeah.
So if I go to him and tell him to pull the ball because he's a righty, hit a line drive at second base. Yeah. Like, hey, pull the ball. We should be able to get that over the third baseman's head like he had done already that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or something along those lines. I'm just going to lose a little bit of trust every time I do that with that player. Yeah. Because in his head, he did everything right. And then his coach is telling him, yeah, but you should fix these things. Yeah. And it's like, there's nothing to fix about like a really hard line drive that should have gotten over the second baseman's head or into right field, and he was just standing in the perfect spot, probably incorrectly, right? And that's happened. Danny had a game where he hit a piss rod directly up the middle, and the kid happened to be standing on second because he didn't get off the base after covering for a pickoff. Yeah, like he didn't do his job and wound up on the base with the glove in his hand, turning a double play through no fault of his own. Yeah, and it's like, what do you want me to tell you to not do that? Like, you did everything right. Like, that sucks.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think about that all the time. We're like, humans by nature sometimes like to gripe and complain about things. And, like,
me too.
Sometimes it's better to just, agree with their gripe and tell them, yeah, that sucks, than, like, try to find a fix for every single situation.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell, hey, you gotta, snap load the power package, right? And like, that's how you solve that. But, like, maybe not. Maybe not. And it's, I don't know. I think one of the tricky things about coaching is just like knowing what not to say is just as important as knowing what to say.
Oh, 100%.
And when I think about, we had the GOAT, Jason Oatchart in here a while ago.
With his bat story.
That bat story, but also something that he and I were talking anecdotally before he went off to spring about him having a goal for coaches that like you want to have like a zero WAR impact on guys at the MLB. These are like real professional baseball players, right? Just don't make them worse,
right?
like just don't make them worse. Which is again, it's a measure of what you do execute, but what you don't.
Yep.
Right. Like that is the impossible thing about coaching. It feels like sometimes because you could, I could find a thing to say.
Yep.
Is it actually going to help the guy get better?
Correct. And also, not for nothing, I know most of the kids are either saying it to themselves in their own head, and I don't need to amplify that.
Yeah.
Or they're going to hear it from mom or dad.
Yeah.
At some point that day, whether it's the car ride home or whatever, and like, I don't need to pile on that. Yeah. I can try to give them a different perspective so that when that conversation happens in the car, they're a little bit happier.
Yeah.
And like, I had one of the kids had a pretty rough day in the field yesterday, and a rough day at the plate. And I talked to his dad about like, and he's like, what? This is going to be a rough car ride home. I was like, yeah, probably. I would probably, and he's like, what should I do? And I was like, I'd probably just like let him vent and listen. Mm-hmm. And like, you're not as bad as your worst day.
Right.
You got to remember the positive things and the good games that you've had, and like try to reset yourself back to those. And remember that like you had a bad day. It doesn't mean you're a bad player.
Yeah.
And if you let that mean you're a bad player, it will.
Yeah.
But I basically was like, I wouldn't say a whole lot. Yeah. Like, let him get it all out. Let him be really frustrated. There's nothing you need to say to pile on. He knows what he did wrong. He's not a dumb kid. He knows what he did wrong, and he's like really frustrated about it. And the best thing you can do is to, PCA, try to fill his tank. Because his tank is super empty right now. And we just got to like fill his tank up as best we can with positive energy.
Yeah. So if you've got a kid, either your own or a kid on a team, and that kid is hyper intense about the way that they kind of self-castigate themselves when they perform poorly, my suggestion would be try to find that kid's favorite MLB guy. Maybe you have to grab a couple and then look up like their high school stats. Because I can assure you that most of them are not always perfect.
Well, I will say I had a really good conversation with my group before warm-ups started. Because I do have probably more than the average group, some college baseball fans. Mm-hmm. So a decent amount of my kids watch super regional stuff this weekend. Yeah. And there's just like a lot of great stuff that happened this weekend. Whether it's, no, I'm not going to remember his name. Was it Jonah Cox? The center fielder, I think it's Oral Roberts, who like who made a great catch of the wall, and the glove and the ball popped out of his glove as he hit the wall, and wound up leading to some runs being scored. His next at bat, he hit a tank. Mm-hmm. And like that was one of the first things that my kids brought up. I said, like, what did you take away from this weekend? That was one of the first things. Was I watched this guy drop a ball at the center field wall in a rough spot for his team, and then come up with the next at bat and hit a bomb. I watched Oregon go down 8-0, and then come back and win that game.
Yeah.
And there were some like really good takeaways, and I think it's when kids play a lot of video games, play a lot of the show, where like they rarely make errors in the show, right? Like it's,
Oh, it's to the point that like, because I have a kid that plays MLB show in my house.
They get very upset when the guys make an error.
It's like, yeah, but buddy, like that's the game.
Yeah. And like watching a lot of big league baseball, you don't see, that many errors, right? So like, I think it's a really good reset for a lot of these kids to watch college baseball because it's a little bit, or a lot closer to what they are looking like at the moment than what an MLB player. And like, we're giving them that different framing of like, look, I know everybody's goal here is to play pro ball, but like your first goal needs to be, I want to play college ball.
Yeah.
Well, first goal needs to be high school ball, but then like at a certain age, then it shifts to college ball before pro. Cause like if you want to play pro and you're not even focused on college, you're focused on the wrong thing. Right. Yeah. And so like to see what does a college baseball player look like? What does a college game look like? And to see some of the scores, to see, Wake Forest put up 19 runs on a team in the super regionals. Like that's really good context for these kids when they give up 19 runs in a game and are like, there's never been a team worse than us. Well, like a team that's one of the best 16 teams in the country just got 19 hung on them. And that's, I found that was like a really good reset for a lot of my kids going into the weekend was to watch a little bit of that and see players that are a better representation of what they like. They look and they see themselves a little bit more than they do in a big leaguer. Yeah. I told them after the game, because we had a rough day yesterday, that because I know I have some video game players on my team. And basically I said, what you guys are doing at the moment is rage quitting video games in real life. Mm-hmm. Like, and you can't do that. You have to find a way to not rage quit, but to focus even harder. Yeah. You use that anger and that frustration in a positive way and focus like more at the task at hand than just like throwing up your hands and wanting to rage quit a game in the second inning.
And the funny thing about that is like, I think, and maybe this is just me, armchair psychologist, but I think sometimes it's scary for the kids to really commit.
Because, 100%.
Because the reality is that like you could put your whole heart into this thing and it may still not go the way that you want. And if you don't commit all the way, you've kind of got like a little bit of an excuse. Like there's a little bit of like, well, I wasn't really trying my best, and that could be true.
Right.
But the tricky part to navigate is like you're the same player either way, or you have the capacity to be the same player either way. And I think it's a great thing that kids can learn, which is just that you can be, if you're fearless enough, then you commit all the way, and you, again, hard work gives you honesty. This is Weathers 101, man. Like you just get a chance to be, see the truth of what that competition outcome meant for you. Of course, again, as we've talked about 1,000,001 times, it's all the more important in that juncture to have a parent or a coach or someone that can give them a little bit of context. Because again, like at 14U, 13 on down, everything below that, you shouldn't have played your most important baseball yet.
Yep.
So,
and here's my plea down will be the show to make a bigger punishment for rage quitting. To try to teach the kids to just like focus and try to get back in the game instead of like you're down 6-0 and just like I'm gonna quit this game.
Sure. I don't know that we have the smoothest transition into this, but for anyone that's joining us on a visual platform, you've noticed some new accoutrement on our wall. Big shout out to our 16U team that went out and won the Camp Christian tournament this weekend, a fairly decently large local tournament. And I think it's time for us to kind of publicly talk in a little bit more detail about how we've constructed rosters, why, and then the change that we've made. Mm-hmm. For the last 2.5 years, we have largely tried to distribute talent. We've tried to be equitable about making sure that all of our teams are competitive. Mm-hmm. And as a result, our teams look very different than a lot of the teams we end up playing, which is typically you concentrate the most talented kids you have all in one group. And I think the thing that we thought we could make happen is that if you distribute those players a little bit better, then all the teams get a chance to be a little bit more competitiveness. And the hope is that kind of the bottom quartile of those rosters doesn't negatively affect everybody's competitiveness so much that you just have a ton of non-competitive teams.
Right. And to distribute that a lot of the playing time equally will benefit the kids that wouldn't normally get playing time.
Yeah. Which I think is in alignment with our broad philosophy
100%.
About what we're trying to do.
Because if you take a 12-year-old who's not great at baseball, or maybe good and just small, and you stash him on the bench, that's probably a kid that's going to quit.
100%.
But if you spread out your talent and allow that kid to get a starting spot and a decent amount of reps, 3-5 years down the line, that could be a foundational, high school player for you. And I firmly believe that.
Yeah. And that's the tricky thing about kind of saying that these wins and losses don't necessarily matter because, and I've had this conversation with some of our parents, they don't, right? Like your most important baseball should be in front of you, not behind you, but it is important if that game result is a thing that, absent the ability to provide context, pushes you to not have another baseball game. Right? Like that's the thing is if a kid decides my tolerance for this, I am at my end, and I don't want to keep playing.
And one thing I think about, because I'd come at this from, my experiences largely in pro ball before I came to Driveline, and I'm a big sports fan. So I think a lot about the 76ers sure. and the trust the process 76ers. Because I was all in on that. I thought I was there's a nerd who's doing it the way I would do it. This is tight.
Yeah.
Didn't get to see that process through.
Yeah.
Because they lost too much.
Yep.
And he was clear up front. Winning and losing doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We're going to stack up some draft picks. We're going to play for the long haul, and never got to see it through because losing became a habit.
Yeah.
And that it's a very difficult thing to break when losing becomes a habit or being not competitive.
Yeah.
Becomes a habit. At pro basketball players down to 9-year-olds.
Yeah.
If being non-competitive in games becomes a habit, that kid's not going to come back or not going to get any better.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we tried to execute, or I suppose I'll not royal we this, I tried to execute a competition and a development team structure previously, and again, I'm more than happy to put all my dirty laundry out there. The reason that wasn't successful is we didn't have a structure in place to kind of have the curriculum be different.
Yeah, there's no differentiation.
Right. And that's the tricky thing, right? Is I think if you think about the ills of conventional travel baseball in that exact configuration, right? The 12-year-old that gets stashed on the bench, because their competitiveness in the current term just isn't good enough. That kid needs something.
Right.
That kid needs something, and they need something that's going to specifically compel them to increase their level of competitiveness. And the reason why we, go like, stashing that kid on the bench isn't helping him or her is because what stimulus are they getting other than watching?
Correct.
Right. So we, I think, recently had a little bit of an inflection point with our 15s and 16s, where we had done just kind of exactly that. Is between our 15s and 16s, we had players that were 14, 15, and 16 spread across these kind of groups, and we hadn't concentrated.
Yeah.
Right?
So we had, when we started the year, we had always had this plan in mind. One thing I think I've learned, more this year probably than anything else is how important it is to message this stuff out as best as possible beforehand. Because really the messaging is everything and how we frame it. But like we started the year with 30 kids, 29 kids between 15 and 16 rosters. Mm-hmm. We had about 10 at each age that we knew, whether because of age eligibility, like 16-year-olds who couldn't play 15U, or just like overall talent, that we had 10 that were probably going to be stationary on each roster. And that other group, that third group, was going to fluctuate between both rosters. Because I'm pretty convicted, the way I see it, 15U is a freshman team, 16U is JV, and then the 18U teams are varsity. And if a kid just played freshman ball, it's good to have him see a decent amount of his playing time with his peers at 15U at freshman ball. But it's also important, especially for these kids that are pretty likely to be JV starters next year, or already even had JV playing time as a freshman, to see that talent as well, to be able to see JV talent. So that was kind of the plan all along, was to fluctuate the rosters and kind of bounce that group of 7 or 8 players, if you will, up and down, to get them looks at both 15 and 16U. Consistency is a real thing. Whether it's consistency of who's in your dugout, who your teammates are, who your coach is, what your schedule is, all of those things really matter. And we didn't really take that into account when our plan was to like kind of shuffle and bounce these kids back and forth.
And it's funny because like I think the pro ball side would suggest that the kind of the negative the negative capacity there would be limited, right? I mean, you can kind of I think like heat check me here, right? But my thought is that like, short season single A, you can mix in some new guys, instructs or whatever. You can have some guys slide in, but like everybody there is already an outlier, right? Right.
So that's, my thought is like, okay, if we have like 3 really good shortstops at the 15, 16U age, I want to spread that out so they all get a decent amount of shortstop playing time, as opposed to like this kid gets all like the bulk of the playing time, this kid will get some, and then this third kid who can play short is going to be relegated to like second or third because whatever. It works in a minor league setting because like you have nobody on the team that is that bad that you are going to just get blown out in certain games. And I'm not saying anybody on our 15U team is that bad, but we struggled with competitiveness, and the players, and basically immediately, it took like a very mental toll very quickly on a lot of those players, where like they showed up to games knowing we're going to get our butts kicked because, these 4 guys aren't playing today. They're on 16U, and like, they're giving up on us kind of a vibe. So like 2 weeks into the season, we had decided that we were going to, I think it was actually 1 week into the season, after like the first week of games, we decided we were going to make the moves a little bit more permanent. And take the couple players that we felt metrically earned it the most and put them on a 16U permanently. And that we didn't have to do the roster shuffling and be a little more consistency.
Yeah.
And that also did not go over great.
Yeah.
Some of the kids that were on 16 that we put on 16U weren't thrilled. And some of the kids that we left on 15U weren't thrilled. And so we went through a couple weeks of it. And it was just clear like we needed a change. And we'd already let it be known next year that we're going to do true A teams and B teams. We can talk about that in a minute, what that looks like and what that means. But we'd already let it be known that was going to be a thing. And we made the decision last week to just kind of rip off the Band-Aid and do that with our 15-16 group. We put our best kids at that, our most competitive kids, whatever way you want to determine it, on the 16U team. And the kids that we felt needed a little bit more development time and an increase in reps remained at the 15U level. And obviously that was a really hard message to send out that we didn't do the best job at. And we had some people that were pretty upset by whether it was the way it was messaged or their kid being felt like he was being picked last in gym class or whatever it was. We learned a lot about how to message that out. And we lost one kid because of that. And it was a really tough week with a lot of those kids being really, more so the parents probably than the kids, because some of the kids, most of the kids understand, even if they're not happy, most of them understand why and what happened. But it was a tough week with a lot of unhappy people. And to be clear, like you don't know what you don't know, and it's hard, right? Like I think we had the intention of doing right by both of those groups. Yeah. Like absolutely. Yeah. With every move that was made, that was the full intention.
But, again, sometimes this iterative process of like developing a program and operating it means you're going to try something with the best of intention. And then you're going to go, all right, well, swing, next pitch.
Yep. Next pitch.
Swing and a miss. Didn't get what I wanted there. Next pitch.
Yep.
And, and I think when you, me, and shout out to Coach Dylan Hawley, just had a couple conversations and you guys have kind of made the decision. And the thing that I wanted to just reiterate a couple times is like, I think the plan that we're trying to execute now is right. Mm-hmm. And it's tough sometimes, swallowing that pill. And I completely understand this. Like you said, feeling like your kid is the one that's picked last for gym class. That's a tough thing, and I think sometimes we talk about training with data as if it's kind of like it's always sunny.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's like I'm always going to see myself making iterative progress. Sure, that's correct. However, you also could be training with data and see, I'm in the bottom 10% of this entire cohort.
Yeah. But it's not just the data, right?
Well, right.
So I sent out a message Monday morning, letting people know, Tuesday morning, because they had a game Monday night. Yeah. So we pushed it today. Tuesday morning, letting people know, and I didn't post what the rosters were intentionally, but I said, this is what we're doing. The most competitive players are going to go up to 16U permanently, and the players who need the most development are going to stay at 15U. And I asked all the parents to come in 45 minutes before practice that night to discuss, see what the rosters are, and immediately got a handful of messages that were pretty upset already. All of them were from kids that were being left on the 15U team, and I had not posted the rosters.
Right.
So it's not just the metrics. They know, right? Like parents are watching the games, kids are watching the games. They know which kids are less competitive than others.
Yeah.
And I think probably the thing that we messed up the most, because I'll say what the development plan was. We pulled them out of some tournaments in June, and entered into tournaments towards the end of July. So they lost
the overall game volume.
Overall, they lost one tournament of game volume.
Right. Tournament game volume.
Correct.
Okay.
We just pushed it back so that we could have 2 more weeks of like really intense practices, some field time, a little bit more development time so that we can work on some of the stuff that these kids are struggling with the most.
Yeah, concentrated development.
Correct. And that message was lost in we're pulling out of the tournament this weekend.
Yeah.
Because they were supposed to be in a tournament this past weekend. We pulled them out of that tournament to re-enter into later July ones. Yeah. And that was kind of the first thing that most of the parents thought was like, we're being pulled out of a tournament. And I get it. And we messed up that messaging. But it like, we knew we were making the right choice.
Yeah.
And the right choice is really hard a lot of the times. And like both Dylan and I had several sleepless nights trying to figure out how to make this work and how to not lose any of the kids. Cause regardless of talent level, we never want to lose a kid. We love these kids. And it was a very difficult week that was capped off by our 16U team going out and winning the GSL championship this weekend.
And it's funny. I think this all like connects to this conversation that Jeremy and I have been having a lot. We haven't clued you guys in. We've spent a lot of time kind of talking about like this chicken and the egg thing of increasing, I think the level of talent that we have in our own program. And the tricky thing is like, man, we believe in development.
Yeah.
Like tattoo it on my chest.
Yeah, we know it works. We
carve it in stone. I believe in it.
We can't say tattoo it in my chest if we haven't gotten the Casey Weathers matching tattoos yet.
All right, we gotta do that. Because we believe in development, I think we have some more tolerance for kids who it's like they might not be the most fully realized version of what they could be capable of. And there's a number of different ways that can show itself, right? You can have kids who are just kind of green to skill, right? They either don't move the bat fast enough, or they don't hit the ball hard enough, or they don't throw the ball hard enough. They could be green to a higher level of competition, right? So think about a kid who only played rec ball, and now they decide they want to like move into the travel select ball space at like 14.
Right.
Okay, well, you've had probably about 20 games a year-ish for the last 4 years. So let's say you've played about 80 games total.
And never done any training or development or anything like that.
You show up to practice, or you show up to games, and like we just go do the thing. And the reality is that there are 10U teams who are going to have more game volume than that in a summer.
Yeah.
But it ends up kind of being this, again, like a chicken and the egg thing of like, well, how do you get more talented players in the door, right? Which I think is one of those things that can increase your program's competitiveness. And I think a lot of teams, that's all they look for, right? Like we talked about tryouts today. It's like I'm gonna bring in 300 kids. And I'm only looking for, it might not even be 10%. It might be 5.
Right.
I might only be really looking to see 15 kids because I know that the additional leverage that each one of those 15 is going to bring me to my program. We've historically been on the other side of that equation where it's like, if the desire to get better at baseball is there, you've got a spot.
Yep.
Because we believe in development, right? We believe that like we can kind of meet you where you are and bring that thing in. I think, like you said, historically the way that we failed, or the way that I failed at that in year 2 with competition development teams, is the curriculum didn't change.
Right. They're in the same tournaments. They're playing at the same level.
Right.
Their practice plans are the same. There was just no...
Right.
We told them their kids were not as good, but we didn't do anything to develop them.
Right. And then ultimately, so again, think about this, whether it's an organization that has equitable talent distribution, so it's not hyper concentrated, or it's an individual team where I've brought in kids to a program because I believe that they need to be developed. And part of that development is exposing them to games. That's all well and good for me to blather about on a podcast. It's tough to execute when the rest of the ecosystem, Jerry, doesn't revolve around that. And we end up, now we're trying to swim upstream.
Right. And then there's, the separate problem of once you get, like, we know that our program works over the long term.
Yep.
So like,
Yep.
you might not get year one, you'll get gains, but they may not be crazy gains. Generally, the craziest gains are year two in our program. Like once you actually are in the swing of things, getting it from the jump. So the long-term thing is real, very real. And you deal with the other problem of, okay, you got to count talented kid in the door.
Yeah.
How do you keep that talented kid in the door?
Right.
Especially if and when there are kids on that team that don't have the same goals.
Yeah.
As him, or the same dedication to practice or things like that.
And trying to serve those two different players
is really difficult.
Man, it's really hard.
Yep.
It's really hard.
Yep. It's nearly impossible to serve both of those players like really well.
Yeah.
And the choice that, I could say publicly we're leaning into is really serving one group more than the other group.
And the other group is getting something different.
And they're getting something different. And it's not serving. Like, we're going to serve both groups the same amount, but we are going to go to true A teams and B teams next year. And that's not, I think one of the things we probably do the worst is training them to play a team sport. We do a really good job of training them to play an individual game.
Yeah.
And then when it expands and now they're on a field and it's an individual game is fine, but now they have to play as a team. That's the part where a lot of times, especially with greener players, we really are not very good at.
And especially if we're not going to play the game volume.
Right.
Right. And so this is we talk all the time about skill being a choice.
Right.
It's not a choice that doesn't come with, I don't want to say net negatives, but it's just, you're going to push and pull, right? Like if I move the sliders over here, we have all this focus on skill development, but we have less game volume. You're just not going to be as savvy, I suppose, potentially as a baseball player. Right. So it just kind of comes down to, again, the same kind of like leverage question. It's like, what is the thing that's going to get you the most leverage to make your high school team?
Right. And to
make your college team.
Right. And like, as you said, there's different kind of players who come. There's a million buckets here, but I'll put them in like two pretty large buckets, which you already did, but I'll like reiterate. One bucket is the kids who are really good at baseball, have a very high IQ, and need to throw it harder and hit it harder.
Yeah.
But like the functional baseball player is there.
Yeah.
The specific skills of being strong, throwing it harder, hitting it harder is not, and that's what they come here to need. Yeah. And like, candidly, those are the players that we have the best results with. The kids that like come in, they know how to play baseball already, and they know I need these two things. They get to work, and we see crazy games with those kind of kids all the time. The second group is the group of kids that kind of need it all. Like you said, they're coming here with they're not super high baseball IQ guys. They haven't played a ton of games, and COVID exacerbates this.
Oh, yeah.
Where like a bunch of kids lost full Little League years. And they also need the skill development.
Yep.
But like developing skill is going to make them much better in the cages. It is not going to have the impact on a field that our training would have on the kid who's already a pretty high baseball IQ player. Yeah. And I think the choice for us, for the most part, to go to A and B teams is to make that division pretty separate.
Yeah.
And
because those two populations do need a different
different set of stimulus,
right. Like different dosing schedule.
Correct.
Yeah.
And like the worst thing you can do, I believe this, to that player who is a really high baseball IQ player who is coming here to gain the skill and knows exactly what he needs out of this place. The worst thing you could do is put that kid in a dugout on a field with a kid who has no idea what he's trying to get out of drive line.
Wants to get better,
but like is totally okay understanding that I am not a great baseball player right now.
Yeah.
I'm just out here for fun and to develop and get better. And like the games here are just extra reps.
Yeah.
And like you have to, like those two types of kids belong in different dugouts.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, is in a part of this conversation about the chicken and the egg, I ended up, Dudo and I were looking at, like, the PG top top 10 at each grad class, right? So you like, you look like the top 2026s. There's one kid on that team or on that list that's not over 6 feet. And that's a 2026.
Yeah.
You look at the 2027s. There's only a couple of kids on that group that are like less than 6 feet. And, and it makes sense when you think about kind of the, travel baseball, the way that you're familiar with, that you just do that thing. You concentrate those kids.
With teammates that are going to push them and challenge them.
Right. But then the tricky thing is that it's like, somebody had a stat the other day that was floating around on the old Twitter about, number of guys that have, played in the Little League World Series and also made it to the show.
Yeah.
That's a very small number.
Very small.
Which I think tells you everything you need to know about everything that we've said before about skills at scale. Yeah. But it also, I think when I see stuff like that, that puts the battery in my back to go like, yeah, I want to take a kid at 10 through 13 that isn't on the top of a PG national ranking sheet. They're 100%. Not on the top of their state national. Like, I don't care. But in order to buy me the time so that I can consistently apply stimulus for that kid, and in order to take that kid who, like you said, high baseball IQ, good skill, but certainly needs to get better, we have to serve them a different meal.
Yeah, it has to be.
Like we have to.
And so the plan next year is we're going to go through our development phase. At the beginning of, we go through an on-ramp and then we go through our development phase. And then we're going to split the teams after the development phase. Yeah. And it is not, obviously, metrics are going to go into that split.
It's part of it.
It's part of it. But your ability to play functional baseball is going to be a larger part of it than metrics. Because it just is.
You know what I've been doing, though, is I've been thinking a lot about like how to quantify that.
Yeah.
Because I think functional baseball player is something that I think all of us have an amorphous
Should we make
idea.
them take a Wonderlic type test?
Maybe. I don't know that that's the test. But I really think, I don't know, Dudo and I had dinner down in AZ many months ago, and we were talking about, this whole question about like defense, because like, how do you quantify it? Because nobody's got that out there. There's no system. There's no like universal. There's no pocket radar for defense.
Yeah.
Like I can get up to the fence and I hold down the button. Kid throws X, right? Like we saw a kid yesterday that played on an academy team previously. He's thrown a little bit harder than he used to, but he's playing for a team that's playing what I would say is a very high volume of games.
They're gonna play over 100 games this year.
Yeah. At 14. And again, you're not talking about 14-year-old professional athletes, so you don't have the time to do skill development and play that type of game volume. And even if you did, that's probably a really bad idea. So it's like, okay, like I understand this approach where you're kind of just capitulating to go, maybe the velo's going to come. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but in the interim, you're going to really kind of like drastically increase the dosing of the thing that's very easy to understand, which is we're playing a crap ton of games. How many did we win?
Right.
Like how many did we win? It's the most easiest thing I think for our country to understand. You play to win the game. Yeah. Herm Lewis, right? Or if you are like me and you listen to Vitamin D, local Seattle hip-hop legend, he will intersperse that little "you play to win the game" quote in a bunch of different mixtapes. Tall Homie Vitamin D on Basecamp or on Bandcamp. You should really go check that out. But I digress. It's the easiest thing to understand.
Yeah.
And I think, we've, had this idea of equity of opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think we finally just came to that point where it's like, okay, you in order to, you can,
right,
but it's gotta be different.
Right. Yeah. Correct. And the quantifying baseball IQ or like defense, you can quote a rapper. I'll quote a a Supreme Court justice.
Let's go.
Justice Potter, who said he doesn't know what porn is, but he knows it when he sees it.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, I can't really quantify it, but when you get a kid on a ball field, whether or not they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's, so there was a play yesterday. The other team had exactly one kid who was small. And he hit a ball in the second game that was a pop-up. And immediately the ball gets hit in the air, and I'm just like, that's short center, in between second base, shortstop, center field. That ball's going to drop because that's how our season has gone so far. That ball's going to drop. And then I turn and look, and our center fielder is, let's just say 6 feet behind second base. Maybe even on the infield, it's not dirt, it's turf, but on the brown of the infield.
Sure.
Directly where he needs to be to catch that ball. And I didn't tell him, hey, the kid's small, probably move in a little bit. And that's one of those things that's just there are some kids who know and who understand and are really focused on the game and seeing things at a different level. And there are some kids that don't do that. Yeah. And that's that could be taught. Yeah. That's totally okay. And you're not even going to have every single player having every single player have that kind of IQ is a pipe dream. But putting those kids who do have that IQ on the same team with kids that are talented but maybe don't will push those kids who are talented and don't to improve their baseball IQ. Yeah. Putting them on a team with kids that don't are just going to push those kids away because they're going to get really frustrated of why weren't you in the right spot? It's well, he doesn't know that. He hasn't had the game reps or he doesn't have the baseball IQ to understand hey, I need to be shifted over here because this guy hit it here last time or whatever the case is. The amount of balls that were hit down the left field, directly down the left field line against us yesterday. And no matter how many times I said it, because I'm standing in the third base dugout right there, we didn't make that adjustment of moving closer to the line, and they just kept hitting it down the line, directly down the line against us. And it's baseball IQ is, I don't think, possible to quantify, but you know it when you see it. Yeah. And that we are going to separate teams based on that, plus the metrics, plus a sprinkling of positional need there, right? To make sure that every team's got enough people to catch, pitch, play short, whatever the case may be. So when we split the teams, that A team, if you will, is going to get a little bit more competition. They're going to kind of be thrown right into scrimmages as much as we can once we say January. They're going to come off a mound. They're going to start getting ready for games because that's the signal that we're sending to these kids is you guys are basically ready and we're done trying to develop skill here. Now we're going to go figure out how to apply it and be competitive in a game. And that second group is kids that we need to work a little bit more. So they're going to go through a second development phase. Yeah. Whether that's, and probably in most cases, we're going to try to add more bat speed. We're going to try to add more throwing velocity. We're going to add more outdoor practices. Yeah. So we're going to try to increase the baseball IQ. Those types of things, it's going to be a separate curriculum than the kids who don't necessarily need that. I literally think about it in terms of school where there's not a remedial course here, but there's advanced and then there's, gen pop or regular, if you will. Yep. It isn't a bad thing to be in the gen pop or the regular portion. We're still going to develop those kids as best we can. They're going to see a good amount of game volume. They're going to get 2 separate development phases to try to increase that. And then the advanced kids, maybe they take their AP test a little early. Yeah. And get in there a little early. And that's something that I think another part of this, as we've discussed, whether or not, this is the move and how do we exactly execute this, there should be a reward for earning some sort of spot on a team. And busting your butt and working hard in practice should come with a carrot. Yep. And sometimes it doesn't if you bust your butt, work hard at practice, and then you're stuck on a team with 4 to 5 guys who don't do that. And then you have to spend the summer losing by 5 runs a game because you've got 4 or 5 kids on your team that just don't have the same goals as you. Yeah. You really want to play in high school, they don't. You really want to play in college, they're just out here for fun. And we have to make that delineation pretty clear. And I think we can serve both of those populations at the same time. And it's not that difficult. We just have to have that second curriculum in place, which we do now. And I think that would have saved a lot of the problems last year. Candidly, we took, the signal we took from, or I took, from having the competitive team and the development team, and a lot of the retention issues we had were on those development teams. The signal I took was people don't like it when you call a team a development team.
Yeah.
And like a lot of parents didn't come back. And I think the real signal, which I just missed, was they don't like it when you call it development team and then don't do anything differently than the competition team.
Yeah.
And so we're sending the message that your kid needs to get better, and then we're not doing what we know will work to get that kid better.
Yeah, and the change now is like, I think we have a better idea of the dosing. You know, like that's the quite literally like the $1 million question.
Yep.
Is we still know that that skill is paramount. Mm-hmm. But we have to find a way to reach those goals while not being obtuse to the fact that we also need to resolve the other thing. And I don't know, man, I don't know anybody else's program as well as I know ours. But man, I can assure you that we are working real hard to to land at this stuff. And sometimes it's not the smoothest. But I think the process and the system by which we kind of evaluate our own program, man, it's just like, are we getting what we want? Are we getting the results? We have to see this stuff with clear eyes. Okay, no, cool. Like we'll make a modification. We'll make a change. And I think it was just so funny to me that like, in this week that we had that was very much wrought with stress. And I'm saying we, but I know that you and Dylan wore it more than anybody else. To see that immediately resolve itself in the old banner over there was just very, very funny. And it does, I think, for me, I'm excited, for us to be able to kind of finally do the thing where we can serve adequately both of those types of players. I think that is a thing that we can do, and we'll continue to develop systems to kind of keep pushing on that thing.
Yeah. And I'm confident that this path is going to work. I'm also confident that when we split these things in December, there are going to be kids who don't want to be on, like, oh, I didn't make the A team, I'm out. I'm going to go find another team to play for. Okay. Like, I think that says a lot, and those are not the types of kids that work the best at Driveline. We
Probably
want the
not.
kids who hear that, and, you talked about it on a different pod. It's a challenge, not a threat.
Yep.
It is not a threat that I'm on the B team, if you will.
Yep.
It's a challenge. I'm going to go work harder and I'm going to get better.
Yeah.
And if their immediate first thought is, I want out, I'm going to go somewhere where I'm handed opportunities, that you can be reasonably confident that that's not a kid who is going to put every ounce of his effort behind getting better. And like, okay, I can't save every kid. I'm going to put as much of my energy into saving the kids that have that mentality and want to be here and want to get better and understand what this place is, as opposed to the kids that just want the playing time and are upset that I'm not seen as one of the best 15, even if we have a clear argument for why that is the case.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a challenge, not a threat. Mm-hmm. And some people, they just see everything in threat vision, and you're right. I think that type of perspective is always going to be really hard. It's going to be really hard to do that here, because then you end up in that scarcity mindset where, like, one kid PRs and that's a threat to you.
Yep.
Because it wasn't you.
Yep. And I will say, one of the interesting developments from last week was the differences in how the parents took the news versus how the kids took the news.
Yeah.
Kids aren't dumb, right? They're out there on the field. They know. Those kids I heard after had already, previous to any announcement that I made or anything, had already basically separated themselves into cliques in like a group chat.
Yeah.
And they had separate group chats, and it almost to a name was
That's so funny.
Was the kids that got moved up to 16U and the kids that remained at 15U. And more than one parent who was very upset and let their frustrations be known had to be calmed down by their own kid. Right? And I think that's a really, I'm coming at this from, I don't have children. But I imagine that's a really, really hard thing as a parent to not immediately jump to, okay, my kid's being left on 15U. He's being left behind. That's a threat. My child is like in danger, if you will. Like, I am going to throw every ounce of my energy into being very upset about this.
Yeah.
Before ever having the conversation with the kid of, what do you think? How do you feel about this? How do you want me to go into this meeting? Are there things you want me to say? Are there things you want me to do? Because I know that there was more than one kid on that team who was, I don't know if embarrassed is the right word, but maybe frustrated by their parents' reaction to the news because they knew.
And especially at that age, you
Right.
know, that as a parent, I can tell you the tricky thing about that 14, 15, 16 age is, at least as far as I can tell, and I for sure have a litany of humongous mistakes I've made as a parent. But with that provision being said, at that time, it's appropriate for your kid to start taking some autonomy for their decisions. And it's not to accuse anybody of being a helicopter parent or, being inappropriate, but like, it's a challenging thing sometimes to kind of like give your kid that freedom and being resolved as best you can, moving into it, that like it is their choice, like it's their choice. And, I guess that again kind of pairs back to this same thing that we started talking about, right? Like, you can do everything right in this game and you can still not get the outcome that you want.
Yep.
You could raise a really good kid and you're going to have to give them some type of autonomy to make their own decision. And it might not be the right decision.
Right.
Like Cora is doing this thing. My daughter right now is like, she's very much moving into her junior year in high school, starting to think about this, like, what do I want to do? And she, for years back and forth has kind of vacillated about wanting to go to law school. When she was very tiny, old enough to kind of like advocate for this, but young enough to not having any idea to know what it meant. She's like, I want to be a Supreme Court justice. Probably due to one of my cousins telling her stories about how cool Ruth Bader Ginsburg was.
Sure.
And she, just like is kind of having this thought. And we were talking the other day, and she's like, yeah, I'm thinking a lot about kind of back and doing the, getting my BA and then going to law school. And there's a part of me that's like, please don't put yourself $500,000 in debt for something that you might not love.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that I can offer advice, but I'm not going to tell her what to do.
Yep.
And I can try to, suggest that like, hey, there might be this like pending entire paradigm change to like higher level education. And maybe in 3 years, you don't have to get $250,000 in debt to get a law degree. But I don't know how that's going to play out. And in the interim, it's her life.
Yep.
And all I can do as a parent is just like make sure that she understands that I love her and support her along the way. And the reality is like, all I can hope for is that if she does make a choice that maybe turns out to not be the right one, or if my kid decides that like, whatever they have in sports and team configuration, all that stuff is the right one, you just want them to learn from it.
Yeah.
Because how else are you going to extract value, you know? And that's the other thing, it's like, it's never great to hear that your kid isn't the best at something. But if you can be open to that being a possibility, right? That my kid isn't the best. And, again, relative to the large scale population, You could say, hey, if you're 16 years old and you aren't, at least 6'2" and 210 pounds, you're not, right? You're just not. That doesn't mean that you can't, with clear eyes, see an opportunity to learn from and get better and get on a path to like actually getting what you want.
Yep.
Like one of those kids, that was on that like top 27, I think it was 2027, was a kid. His pitching line from the last time that I saw, 72 pitches, 38 strikes. He gave up 1 hit, no earned, 6 walks, 7 punchies. And that is a 2027 that like, D1 schools are looking at.
Yep.
Not perfect.
Right.
What do you learn?
Yeah. And that's, I think maybe like one of the things that really separates us as a program is, most programs just make that decision and say, here it is.
Yeah.
And I heard that from, several parents this week that, one of the reasons they didn't remove their child from the program after that decision, or one of the reasons that they were able to like kind of get through that, was because I was willing to sit in that room for 3 hours and let them vent about it. And like I definitely learned a lot from the process of how to communicate and message things out much better. One of the things I believe is, and you can tell Cora this, is if she wants to go to law school, a good lawyer never asks a question he doesn't already know the answer to.
Correct.
And I walked in that room, like thinking about it later that night, I walked in that room not knowing what the answer to my question would be for a lot of those parents.
Sure.
And that is, I set myself up for probably a pretty long night. And like reaching out and having those conversations beforehand so that we can clearly explain what the development plan is and try to get out in front of some of the anger, or at least like let them have a conversation with their kid about it before they come into that room. Definitely was the move, and I did not do that. When I was thinking about it ahead of time, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, what are the biggest issues that parents are going to have with this split? And obviously the biggest one is like loss of playing time, loss of reps, things like that. And like we came up with a very strong plan to not lose any reps or playing time, and like still develop these kids at that point. And that got lost because they were just like upset entering the room about my failed initial message, right? Of just saying like, hey, we're splitting the rosters, more information to come tonight.
Yeah.
So they went into that meeting already ready to just be upset about us splitting rosters, and kind of closed-minded to hearing about, okay, here's our plan. And like, it's a pretty good plan.
Yeah. Why and how?
Right. But everyone's going to make mistakes, and like learning from each one of them is important. And like the thing that we will always do is sit in that room and learn and take feedback. And, if it takes being yelled at, because we do actually legitimately care about every single kid in this program and their development.
Yeah.
And I know this to be true, other programs don't do that. And they will make that decision and then will not return your call if you are angry and calling.
Oh, yeah, they'll just ghost you.
They'll just ghost you.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, I suppose in the marketplace economy, to each their own about which program you want to affiliate yourself with and principally, put your child in.
Yep.
But I think the thing, for me, something that I am incredibly proud of what, you and Dylan and all of us are trying to do is take signal from this stuff, learn from it, and then continue to like evaluate. I mean, that's the only way that we're going to ever get this thing, to where we want it to be. I mean, we've joked for years at Driveline about like, have we solved baseball yet? No. Have we solved travel baseball yet? No.
Nope.
But, I think the more that we learn from stuff like this and we turn that into structure, it's now every day moving forward, we have a clear explanation of like what we do and why. Mm-hmm. We know. And, we tried to swim upstream for, I don't want to say too long, but we tried. We really, really tried. And the reality is it's just like the game environment, the stuff that you can't control doesn't really give you a lot of leeway to do that. So it's like, okay, well, again, how do we serve, two different player populations? Well, we have to have two different things.
Right.
We just have to. And both of them are designed for a kid to get the most out of their experience in the game as possible. It's just different curriculum.
Correct.
So yeah. Feel like this is one more show where I don't have something like funny or uplifting to bring us out of. Yeah,
uplifting.
Sure, uplifting. We duct taped a banner to the wall for anybody that can't see it for the tournament that we just won. I'm sure we'll have a more professional presentation of it, or maybe we'll just stick with the duct tape.
I'm
not mad at the duct tape.
I kind of like the duct tape.
Sure.
I think the duct tape, because as I said earlier, if you're on an audio only format, there is no date, there is no age. This is just like the stock banner that they give to every team who wins, no matter what their age is or what division or what event or anything like that.
Yeah.
So
I get it.
It's I understand. So the hope is that we stockpile a bunch of these that look the exact same because they're just going to give you a bunch of them for every age group, right?
If we could wallpaper this whole wall, that'd be kind of gas.
Yeah.
I don't know we're going to get there, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, for now we have the start of our congratulations. You guys did the thing.
Correct.
And we did a thing. So yeah, big shout out to the 15U and 16U families for going through it with us. Like I said, man, I'm just really proud of how our guys have worked really, really hard to do right for all these kids.
Yep.
And
even though the message got botched a bit, I don't think anybody in that room got the impression that we don't care so much about more than baseball.
Yeah. Yeah. Our investment level is 10/10.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So that's all we got for today. I have no idea what we're going to talk about next time. Maybe we'll talk about, I know what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about why we're doing individual player assessments instead of a group tryout for the coming season and why tryouts are kind of wash. We should do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do it. So we'll talk about tryouts and stuff. We'll talk about what we collect, talk about what we're looking for, talk about how we do it. I'm not sure how actionable that's going to be for any of you if you don't have a set of force plates, but you can just call Burtech for that. Maybe we'll get Burtech to be a sponsor.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah. We'll figure it out. So until then, we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks.